Hey guys, tonight we wander back to the very first sparks of civilization, drifting across dusty plains where two mighty rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, cut silver ribbons through brown earth. You can almost smell the damp clay, freshly turned by calloused hands. The air is thick with heat, buzzing with insects, and you're trudging through a world where survival is not a given. You probably won't survive this, honestly, unless you can handle a diet of flatbread, onions, and whatever fish you manage to snatch from the river. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling awake enough, drop a comment with your location and your local time. I love seeing where all of you are listening from. It feels like our own little global campfire. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle through reeds at the riverbank, barefoot, squelching into mud that will soon be molded into bricks. These bricks, stacked carefully into rectangular huts, will outlast their builders. At first, people here are nomads, wandering with goats, sheep, and stubborn donkeys. But now, in this wide valley, something new is unfolding. Farming takes root, grains and barley bend heavy in the fields, and suddenly humans don't have to move so much. They can stay, they can build. And so villages bloom. The rivers bring both life and trouble. Irrigation channels stretch like veins, redirecting water to thirsty crops. It's ingenious, but it means everyone has to work together. Digging canals, repairing dikes, praying the floods don't arrive too late or too strong. Historians still argue whether these rivers' unpredictable moods are what forced Mesopotamians to invent organized leadership in the first place. After all, someone has to boss the neighbors around when the ditch collapses. The land is flat, horizons stretching wide, and from your little hut of reed mats, you see smoke rising from other clusters of homes. Slowly, mud huts multiply. Soon they're surrounded by walls, then temples, then market stalls where farmers trade onions for fish and jars of thick date syrup bubbling in clay jars. And with these bustling spaces comes noise. Goats bleating, hammers clinking, neighbors arguing over whose sheep trampled whose field. Civilization has begun, and it's loud. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some of the earliest settlements, like Eridu, archaeologists have found what they think are shrines buried beneath newer buildings. Imagine living in a town where your basement might actually be a sacred temple layered over centuries. That's not the kind of renovation surprise you want when digging for extra storage space. And yet, in this swirl of mud and heat, humans are inventing city life, markets, rituals, even gossip. Someone steals your goat? Congratulations! You've just invented the concept of crime. Someone promises to repay grain after harvest? Well, now you've invented credit with all the future headaches it will bring. As you lie back in the shade, sweating from a long morning of hauling reeds, you feel the ground vibrating faintly. It's the rhythm of hundreds of people hammering, digging, building, all at once. These early city dwellers don't know it yet, but they're laying foundations not just for mud walls, but for everything that will come after: laws, stories, gods, and empires. The village is no longer just huts along a river. It's turning into a machine powered by human cooperation and fear of the flood. And as you drift off listening to distant chants offered up to river gods, you realize you're witnessing the very birth of cities. You leave the crowded streets of Uruk and find yourself drawn toward the towering steps of a ziggurat, its bulk rising like a mountain in a land that barely knows hills. The air is hot, shimmering in waves, and the stones under your feet radiate the day's sun. You climb slowly, each step echoing, and at the top you pause. From here, the city sprawls below, walls, canals, and clay roofs stretching endlessly. But tonight, The focus isn't the city, it's the gods. Stories drift around you like smoke. You hear about Anu, the sky father, Enlil, the storm god whose temper brings floods and winds, and Inanna, goddess of love and war, who can bless your romance or wreck your week depending on her mood. The Sumerians live under a sky filled with divine drama, and every temple chant feels like a phone call to the heavens, except you never know if the line is busy. Down in the temple courtyard, a priest chants the story of Gilgamesh. You lean in, listening. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, is powerful but restless. To humble him, the gods send Enkidu, a wild man of the steppe. The two clash like thunder, but then, against all odds, they become inseparable friends. Their adventures are bold, reckless, and strangely human, slaying the monster Humbaba, insulting the goddess Ishtar, and paying dearly for it. When Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh wanders the earth desperate to find immortality, only to discover it's forever out of reach. You feel the weight of the tale. It's humanity's oldest surviving epic, and it's still about love, grief, and the fact that even kings can't escape death. Historians still argue whether Gilgamesh himself was a real king of Uruk or a stitched-together legend from multiple rulers. Either way, his story shaped how Mesopotamians saw the world. Life is fragile, death is certain, but stories, well, those last. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Mesopotamian myths claim the gods made humans specifically to do the hard labor they were too lazy for. Imagine being created just to irrigate fields and feed picky gods their daily offerings. If that doesn't sound like a cosmic unpaid internship, I don't know what does. As the chants fade, musicians strike up a low rhythm on drums, and incense thickens the air. You catch glimpses of everyday superstition woven into life. Protective amulets shaped like lions, spells written on clay tablets, and little clay figurines buried beneath doorways to guard homes from demons. The people don't just believe in gods, they believe in spirits lurking everywhere, ready to help or haunt, depending on your luck. The ziggurat itself glows under torchlight, each level stacked toward the heavens. It feels less like a building and more like a stairway carved between earth and sky. Standing at the edge, you see the stars above, brilliant and endless, and below, the flickering city lights. You sense what the Mesopotamians must have felt, caught between divine forces and earthly struggles, always searching for meaning in floods, in stories, in the night sky. As you drift into sleep on the temple steps, the chants echo in your ears. Humans may toil, gods may argue, but the myths keep the world stitched together. You wake to the clang of hammers on bronze and the soft hush of voices rolling across a palace courtyard. Pitch smoke threads upward from kilns. Guards in leather helmets stand rigid along a mud brick wall, while scribes hustle past with armfuls of clay tablets balanced like warm loaves. You slip into the colonnade, where sunlight lays ladders on the floor, and watch a courtroom assemble, out of breath and dust. Elders on stools, petitioners rehearsing whispers, a scribe testing his reed stylus against a damp tile until the wedge bites clean. Justice here is a performance, slow, methodical, and public enough that even the pigeons seem to hold their questions. A herald calls for order. Two men step forward to argue about an ox whose horns look tired of being famous. One swears the animal gored his son. The other insists the creature is a pacifist who contemplates sunsets. A scribe cracks a clay envelope, an actual baked shell that protects a softer tablet inside, because verdicts in this world aren't supposed to be pure vibes. They're anchored in writing that anyone with patience and a good squint can read. You half expect someone to pass around popcorn. Instead, someone passes a tally stick. Close enough.
Joke 1. Salted lightly. Before this case, a wider truth. For centuries across Sumer and Akkad, kings have doubled as judges. Ur-Nammu of Uruk, long before Babylon's heyday, issued a code that set fines for injuries and theft. Lipit Ishtar of Izin followed with his own list. The mainstream fact lands with a dusty thump. Hammurabi didn't invent written law, he monumentalized it. Still, you can picture the very first person to scratch "Do not move your neighbor's boundary stone" into wet clay and then glance meaningfully at the neighbor. Some problems are eternal. Now you stand in Babylon, around 1750 BCE, facing a tall black stele of diorite. At its top, the sun god Shamash gives King Hammurabi a rod and ring, symbols of measure and authority, while below, neat rivers of wedge marks run for hundreds of lines. You trace a groove with your fingertip and feel the promise humming through it. Let there be justice and let it be legible. Historians still argue whether the Code of Hammurabi was enforced literally, served mainly as royal propaganda, or functioned like a master syllabus for judges and scribes. Either way, the message shines. A king should make the strong stop eating the weak for breakfast. You read and wince. If a builder's house collapses and kills the owner, the builder dies. That's an extreme warranty policy. But look closer, and you find nuance. Many wrongs resolve with money, silver by weight, grain by measure, repayment with interest. Penalties shift with social class. Awilu for elites, mushkenu for commoners, wardu for enslaved. So the same injury can cost more or less depending on who you are. An eye for an eye sounds fierce, yet it's also a limiter. It caps vengeance so families don't spiral into feuds that make fence mending a full-time career. Law here nudges hot blood toward cooler math. The courtroom hums like a loom. Scribes crack more clay envelopes, read out contracts, and press fresh notes onto damp tiles that will harden in the sun and then live for centuries in a woven basket. Cylinder seals, tiny engraved rollers kept on cords like jewelry, spin across wet clay to leave signatures. Marching lions, clasped hands, stars, little dramas compressed into a thumb's breadth. You borrow one and roll a parade of miniature heroes across the receipt for your extremely legitimate barley purchase. Congratulations! You've joined the Mesopotamian HR department, whose mission statement is, "We remember everything forever." Joke 2, filed and stamped. Here's a quirky tidbit. When proof is shaky, a court can order the river ordeal. The accused is tossed into the water. If they drown, the gods judge them guilty. If they bob up and clamber ashore, innocence confirmed. You edge away from the bank and decide honesty is your brand. Another odd habit. Merchants sometimes seal a tablet inside a clay shell and write the summary on the outside, so a judge can crack the envelope to verify nobody edited the inside later. Imagine your emails arriving encased in pottery you have to smash to read. Every inbox becomes an archaeological dig. The king, Hammurabi here in memory, or a local strongman in the flesh, sits beneath a canopy, face as smooth as new clay. He is shepherd, canal fixer, temple funder, tax collector, and brand ambassador for cosmic order. Petitioners step forward. A daughter demands her dowry back after a marriage collapses. A boatman claims a partner shorted him on copper. A farmer complains his neighbor diverted water at the wrong hour of the irrigation cycle. Oaths fly, by Shamash, by Marduk, by Ishtar, and the room feels like a storm cloud of promises. Evidence matters. Weights and measures are standardized, scales are inspected, contracts name witnesses and repeat the terms until even you could recite them in your sleep. Prisons are rare, restitution is normal. People repay, replace, and repair. Bodies pay too when the stakes rise. You flinch, then notice the steadying effect. Knowing the tariff turns enemies into negotiators. Instead of feuding until someone's courtyard becomes a scene from the epic of "Please stop," people bargain, count silver, and adjust ropes on their gates. A priest arrives with a clay model of a sheep's liver mapped with tiny zones. Extisipe, reading real livers for omens, is usually.
You wander out of the law courts and into the sunlit sprawl of markets, where the air hums with barter and chatter. The scent of baked bread mingles with sheep dung, and the clink of bronze scales punctuates every negotiation. Here, Mesopotamia's lifeblood flows not through veins of soldiers or scribes, but through the dusty feet of merchants, hauling goods from every direction you can name, and a few you probably can't. Long lines of donkeys shuffle in from the west, packs laden with wool and baskets of grain. From the north, copper gleams faintly under cloth wrappings. From the far east, the hypnotic blue of lapis lazuli dazzles in small, carefully guarded lumps. Traders from Dilmun, what you'd call Bahrain today, bring dates, pearls, and fish oil, their boats stitched with palm fiber and smelling like the sea. You can almost taste the salt on the wind as they unload jars sealed with pitch. The mainstream historical fact is simple enough. Mesopotamia had almost no natural metal, stone, or wood, so trade wasn't optional, it was survival. Cities like became crossroads where necessities poured in, and luxuries glittered just enough to remind people they weren't scraping by. Without this web of caravans and ships, all the law codes and ziggurats in the world would crumble back into mud. You stop at a stall where a merchant haggles loudly over tin, essential for making bronze. Without tin, swords, plows, and statues vanish. The merchant insists on a higher price, waving his arms as though volume might increase value. His customer sighs, pulls out a little heap of silver rings and weighs them carefully. No coins exist yet. People pay in chunks of silver, or in goods, barley, wool, or oil, measured with obsessively standardized weights. You wonder how many arguments erupted over a crooked scale. Historians still argue whether these early silver standards counted as true money or were just glorified IOUs with extra shine. Here's a quirky tidbit. Clay tokens, shaped like cones, spheres, and cylinders, were used for centuries to represent goods in transactions before writing fully developed. Imagine buying your groceries today with a little bag of Play-Doh shapes, cone for barley, sphere for sheep, disc for oil jar. Eventually, people got tired of carrying bags of tokens and started pressing them onto clay tablets as impressions, the first receipts, cluttering kitchen drawers even back then. You weave deeper into the market, where artisans display jewelry strung from carnelian beads, shell inlays, and gleaming bronze daggers that sparkle just enough to attract trouble. A potter spins clay on a wheel, shaping jars with practiced flicks of his hands. Behind him, apprentices scrub their arms clean of slip, muttering about sore wrists and long hours. Even the sound of the potter's wheel feels rhythmic, like a drum beat holding the whole scene together. Someone shouts about a shipment of cedar wood arriving from Lebanon. You crane your neck and see beams being unloaded, their resinous smell cutting through the sweat and smoke of the bazaar. Without tall trees of their own, Mesopotamians treasured cedar for building temples and boats. To you, the beams look ordinary. To them, they're almost sacred, tokens of connection with distant mountains they may never see. Jokes float through the crowd like birds. One trader grumbles, "If the gods wanted us rich, they'd have dropped tin in the river instead of mud." Another complains his donkey eats more profit than it carries. You chuckle, realizing that supply chain problems have been humanity's favorite complaint for 5,000 years. At the river's edge, barges bob in the current, lashed with ropes and stacked high with cargo sealed in clay jars. Boatmen smear pitch on seams to keep the water out, coughing from the fumes. The vessels look flimsy, but they carry fortunes. From here, canals branch like capillaries into the countryside, feeding villages and redistributing wealth. You realize the market isn't just chaos, it's a system, finely balanced, always on the verge of collapse, yet somehow enduring. Night settles, and torches flare. Traders gather in taverns, sipping beer through reed straws, swapping stories of bandits, storms, and crooked partners. Deals continue in whispers, sealed with handshakes, silver, and the occasional cylinder seal rolled across wet clay. You sip the gritty brew, tasting both bitterness and comfort, and feel the hum of a network stretching across deserts and seas. As you lean back against a mud wall, the stars prick the night sky, the same stars that guided caravans across endless dunes. The goods in this market will vanish, eaten, worn, burned, but the connections they represent will echo across centuries, carrying Mesopotamia's pulse far beyond its rivers. The market fades behind you, and in its place rises the clang of bronze against bronze, the crunch of sandals in dust, and the low growl of horns sounding across the plains. Mesopotamia is not only trade and temples, it's a land where power shifts with the swing of a mace. You trudge toward the walls of a city bristling with spears, its gates fortified with heavy beams, its ramparts crowded with archers scanning the horizon. War is here, and it has a permanent address. The flatness of the land is both gift and curse. Crops grow well, irrigation thrives, but there are no mountains to hide behind. If you can see the smoke from your neighbor's hearth, they can see yours, and they might just knock on your gate with a battering ram. Rival cities like Uruk, Lagash, and Kish constantly jostle for farmland, canals, and bragging rights. A canal diverted here, a herd stolen there, and suddenly, armies march. You stand on the wall of Lagash and watch dust clouds announce approaching troops. The mainstream historical fact is that war in Mesopotamia was as common as the floodwaters. Kings needed to prove themselves not only as builders of temples, but as defenders of their people. Victory meant not just survival, but divine approval. A king without victories risked being labeled illegitimate, abandoned by the gods. Down below, soldiers form up. They carry spears tipped with bronze, shields made of wicker stretched over wood, and helmets of leather or copper that glint in the sun. Their battle lines move like an undulating wall, shields tight together, spears bristling forward. Chariots, light two-wheeled platforms pulled by donkeys or onagers, roll along the flanks, rattling and squeaking, more terrifying noise than deadly speed. Historians still argue whether these early chariots were practical weapons or more like ancient parade floats meant to scare rather than slice. Here's a quirky tidbit. One of the earliest known battle records, the Steel of the Vultures, shows soldiers of Lagash trampling their enemies in tight phalanx formations. Above them, actual vultures fly off clutching severed heads in their claws. Nothing like a stone-carved cartoon to remind you that Mesopotamian artists had a flair for the dramatic. The gates open, and the army surges out. Dust stings your eyes, and you smell sweat, bronze, and the bitter tang of fear. Slingers whirl stones overhead, hurling them with bone-snapping force. Spears clash, shields splinter, and you realize the walls might not be high enough to keep chaos at bay. You duck as an arrow whistles past your ear, close enough to remind you that history lessons can be hazardous to your health. Beyond battles, walls themselves tell stories. Every city worth its salt builds fortifications, sometimes reinforced with baked brick, sometimes with sheer mud ramparts. Kings boast of wall building and inscriptions as though stacking bricks equals divine endorsement. Babylon's walls later on will become legendary, so massive that people argue whether they were real or exaggerated. Joke 1. like the ancient version of my Wi-Fi signal reaches the moon. Inside the city, families huddle in courtyards, clutching amulets and muttering prayers. The priests, never ones to miss an opportunity, sacrifice sheep and examine livers for omens. If the gods frown, the city's morale sinks faster than a leaky barge. Still, resilience shines. Blacksmiths repair weapons overnight. Women bake bread for soldiers, and messengers sprint across rooftops to relay orders. Everyone, from king to potter, is drafted into defense. A break in the fighting gives you time to notice another oddity. War booty often includes not just livestock or grain, but entire statues of gods stolen from temples. Nothing humiliates a rival city more than having its divine protector carted away. Imagine your neighbor stealing not just your car, but your family's guardian angel. Cities sometimes fought decades just to get their gods back. The clash resumes, and you catch sight of a commander shouting from a raised platform, urging men forward with a bronze axe flashing in the sun. His soldiers chant, drums pound, and for a heartbeat, the whole plain feels like it shakes.
You step through a blue-glazed gate where lions prowl across bricks, their paws forever mid-stride. The Ishtar Gate hums with color even in low torchlight, and you drift down the processional way as though the city itself is chanting. Babylon breathes differently, measured, deliberate, obsessed with keeping time the way a scribe keeps columns straight. After the clang of war, this feels like entering the control room of the sky. You climb a stair that corkscrews up a ziggurat, each level catching a little more wind, a little more starlight. At the top, the night opens like a great black tablet, and priests in felt caps lean over polished bowls of water that mirror the constellations. They whisper planet names that sound like passwords. Mole for the Pleiades, the furrow for Virgo, then make neat marks on clay. You recognize the rhythm. The same wedge shapes that counted barley rations in Uruk and recorded ox drama in the law court now track the steady wanderings of Mars and Venus. The city's brain has turned upward without forgetting its stomach. A firm, mainstream fact glows here. Babylonians build a base 60 system so elegant you still wear it on your wrist and draw it on maps. 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute, 360 degrees in a circle. Your phone, your compass, your classroom protractor are all tiny Babylonian souvenirs. You watch a scholar convert an awkward fraction with a flourish, then grin as he explains that 60 has more divisors than you have patience, which makes calendars behave and debt settle. Be honest, if you had to divide cake among 24 cousins after a temple feast, you'd choose base 62. Joke 1, the original cut me a 1/12 degree slice. Clay tablets pile up around a low lamp. On one, a neat table lists right-angled triangles you'd later call Pythagorean. The tablet's modern nickname will be Plimpton 322, but tonight it's just a clever cheat sheet for surveyors and students who forgot their notes. The master murmurs, a wall, a field corner, a canal bank, everything is triangles if you squint. Historians still argue whether this tablet is a trigonometric table avant la lettre or a workbook of ratios meant to keep canal sides honest and boundaries straight. You think of the old commandment not to move the boundary stone and smile. Mathematics is the quiet bodyguard of law. Beyond numbers, the city times its life to lights that wander. Astronomer-diviners keep astronomical diaries, rows of observations noting moon crescents, eclipse shadows, river heights, even the price of barley and oil. If Mars brightens and barley gets expensive, is that a pattern or a coincidence? The diaries don't preach, they notice. It's long-haul science disguised as temple bookkeeping. A scribe gently teases you. We like our mysteries with data. You raise your beer straw in salute. Yes, the old Uruk habit survives on rooftop vigils, the brew grittier this high in the wind. Quirky tidbit for your pocket. Priests sometimes stare into a still basin to watch star reflections, using the bowl like a portable sky. If a cloud passes over the real heavens, the bowl keeps the star visible for a heartbeat longer. You try it, and for once the cosmos feels cooperative, like a shy god stepping back into frame. Another oddity, when Venus, Inanna or Ishtar's star, vanishes into the sun's glare and reappears as morning or evening star, the city listens. The Venus tablets, older than most family trees, log those disappearances with the patience of moss. Whether a campaign launches or a canal opens can hinge on such re-entries. Scheduling your life by a glitter dot. Somehow, it works. You leaf through a thick omen series called Enuma Anu Enlil, where thousands of entries bind the sky to the world below. If the moon wears a halo and Jupiter stands within it, write this down, big things are coming for kings and canals. You wince at a memory of Ixtisipe, the sheep liver maps from the court, and realize this is the same habit dressed in starlight. Pattern, correlate, advise, repeat. The city doesn't just want to know the future, it wants to tune itself to celestial rhythm, like retightening the strings of a lyre. Between songs, yes, it's basically a cosmic to-do list with weather and snack prices. Down in the scribal quarter, schoolboys chant multiplication tables and struggle through word problems about bricks, boats, and, naturally, beer. A brewer mixes this much malt and that much date syrup, how many jars? You catch a line where the answer hinges on 1/3 of 1/6, and your eyelid twitches. The master taps a tablet. Place value, child. Babylon doesn't invent 0 as a full number the way later mathematicians will, but it uses a placeholder sign and the power of where a symbol sits. Every column matters. The future will call that a revolution. Tonight it's just homework with clay under your nails. You circle back to the ziggurat top where an elder plots Jupiter's crawl. He draws trapezoids under a slanted line and mutters about areas representing distance. A hint that centuries from now someone will realize these priests are, in their way, doing geometry on motion. The elder shrugs. We prefer what works. You tuck the thought away beside the memory of chariots that maybe terrified more than they killed. Here, too, usefulness beats elegance. Farther along the terrace, 2 visiting scholars argue in whispers about the city's wonders. One swears the hobbled gardens hang inside Babylon itself, a stair-step paradise watered by clever machinery. The other insists you'll find them later in Nineveh under a different king. Historians still argue whether the hanging gardens of Babylon belonged to Nebuchadnezzar II or were really Sennacherib's mountain garden up north. You look over the dark river, trying to picture green terraces layered over brick, and decide that even if the location shifts, the desire is constant. Make earth imitate heaven, make shade in a furnace. Night deepens. Constellations the Babylonians named, the lion, the scales, the twins, drag slowly west. Their zodiac is a city ringed with signs, and you walk its avenues with your eyes. Calendars slip into place. Intercalary months added when harvest and moon fall out of step, festivals pegged to the new crescent, debt due on the day after the full moon so no one can claim, I didn't see the calendar. Joke 3. The moon is the original push notification. Bright, regular, and impossible to snooze. Somewhere below, the duck-shaped weight from the courtroom glints on a merchant's table. Somewhere beyond, caravans re-hitch donkeys for the dawn. Up here, silence cracks only when a stylus taps clay. The same drive that stacked walls against enemies now stacks numbers against chaos. You lie on warm brick and feel the city counting. Days, stars, debts, promises. It isn't cold, There's tenderness in keeping track. Records say, "You were seen." Tables say, "You belong to a pattern." A breeze lifts the smell of baked brick and date palm. You think of the beer straws of Uruk and the boundary stones of Hammurabi's court, the vultures circling old battles, and feel how Babylon gathers those threads and knots them to the sky. When morning comes, the priests will file their tablets, the market will set its rates, and children will scratch numbers until the wedge bites clean. For now, you watch Venus blink in the east like a sleepy eye, and feel the city's brilliance, practical and patient, pour over you like cool water from a sacred bowl.
You follow a road so well kept it feels like a promise under your feet. Mile after mile, stone markers pass like metronomes, and relay stations pop up right when your calves start filing complaints. A rider thunders by, swaps horses in one breath, and vanishes again. No scrolls dropped, no time wasted. The signboard calls this the King's Road, but you'll hear later that Herodotus nicknames its couriers the kind who are stopped by neither snow nor rain, nor heat nor gloom of night. You squint at the blue dome of Mesopotamian sky and decide the motto fits. The empire hums in hoofbeats. The city ahead is not Nineveh's storm-gray sprawl or Uruk's reed and beer bustle. This is Babylon under new management, the gates quiet, the courtyards orderly, the temple granaries catalogued with the same care you saw in Assyrian archives, but the tone has changed. Banners flare with a stylized winged disc. Officials invoke Ahura Mazda in formal proclamations. Aramaic, easy on the tongue, travels faster than cuneiform across satrapies the size of dreams. You've entered the shade of Persia, where kings rule by web and weight, roads, coins, and letters tying far places to a center that keeps its voice calm. Mainstream fact first, laid like a foundation brick. In 539 BCE, Cyrus the Great takes Babylon. He issues decrees restoring temples, returns certain displaced peoples to their homelands, and presents himself not as a conqueror, but as the rightful caregiver at Marduk's city. A cylinder tucked into the walls, the famous Cyrus cylinder, celebrates this transfer of power in smooth, self-confident Akkadian. Historians still argue whether that clay text is the dawn of human rights talk or simply superb local PR, a conqueror speaking Babylon's favorite language. Don't worry, I love your gods as much as you do. Either way, the city exhales. You drift through an office where scribes tally barley rations in Aramaic on papyrus and leather, while cuneiform still clicks away in temple back rooms. The empire doesn't erase, it layers. Silver rings you weighed in old markets give way to stamped coins, the gold daric and silver siglos. Faces and archers pressed into metal, so merchants no longer argue about purity quite as loudly. Your beloved duck-shaped weight still sits on a shelf, loyal as ever, but coins jingle in purses now, a new rhythm for old exchanges. Joke 1. Somewhere, a crooked scale files for early retirement. You map on the wall divides the realm into satrapies, Babylonia one piece among many, each with a governor, a garrison, and the king's eyes and ears, inspectors who show up unannounced and make accountants sweat. Darius I, the organizer-in-chief, will tune this system like a lyre. Standard tribute schedules, audited storehouses, weights that match from Susa to Sardis. He loves a clean column the way priests love a steady moon. You see couriers standing by at the Angarium post. You see tablets and wax boards traveling in sealed covers, and you feel how administration becomes architecture. The empire is not only walls, it's deadlines. Quirky tidbit for your pocket. Far to the northeast, Darius climbs a sheer cliff at Behistun, well, his workmen do, roped like spiders, and carves a billboard in 3 languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. The relief shows the king with a bow, rebels lined up like a moral lesson, and a winged figure hovering overhead. It's a giant About Me page etched into limestone, the Rosetta Stone's cousin, and a lifesaver for future scholars who will puzzle out cuneiform by triangulating those lines.
Imagine your resume chiseled on a mountain where goats stubbed their hooves reading it. Joke 2. Great visibility. Questionable commute. You wander a garden enclosed by high walls, a paradisa, a word that will stroll into Greek as paradeisos and eventually into your language as paradise. Cypress, date palm, pomegranate, channels whisper under stone, vines climb trellises like polite acrobats. The empire loves order, but also shade, and shade is mercy in this land. Officials stroll and talk in low tones about canal dredging, the cost of cedar, and whether to add an intercalary month so harvest festivals stop arriving awkwardly early. The cosmic to-do list from Babylon is still here, but now it's printed in several scripts and routed through more departments. Back in the city, the Isagila temple receives offerings again, the shrine of Marduk busy with rituals that look comfortingly old. A priest nods to a Persian official. Both understand the bargain. Keep the gods fed, keep the canals clear, pay the tribute, and life can be predictable in the best way. You think of Assyrian deportations and feel the gentler pressure here. Still a taxman at the gate, still soldiers on the walls, but the tone is cooperate and prosper, rather than submit or else. Of course, that tone deepens when rebellions flare. Darius does not hesitate to put uprisings down, then file neat reports about doing so. Soft voice, firm handwriting. At a granary, you watch ration tablets, sometimes cuneiform Elamite, sometimes Aramaic notations, acknowledge workers by name, craft, and quantity of barley or beer allotted. The details are intimate. A woman brewer here, a transport captain there, a mason's crew elsewhere, all logged with a precision that feels almost affectionate. Remember the old line that records say, "You were seen"? The empire amplifies it. Visibility becomes policy. You can complain about bureaucracy, but you'll still show up for your rations on time. Joke 3. Press, "I have read the terms and conditions," with a cylinder seal. In a workshop, you pass fire altars, small and plain, and wonder how Zoroastrian the court truly is. The royal inscriptions hail Ahura Mazda. The day-to-day religion in Babylon remains a crowd scene of ancient gods. And the empire, practical as ever, doesn't insist on creeds so long as oaths bind and rivers run on schedule. You overhear a debate between two scholars about just that. Are these kings strict Zoroastrians or patrons of a broader Iranian tradition wearing Zoroastrian language like a ceremonial cloak? You tuck the question away with other comfortable uncertainties. Sea wind rumors blow inland. Darius has cut or revived a canal linking the Nile to the Red Sea, dotted with stelae that brag in multiple tongues. Ships slip through as if the king were teaching water new tricks. Out on the steppe, roads splay toward Central Asia. In the west, milestones call out distances to Sardis. The view from Babylon feels less like a river world and more like a network. The city a node, pulsing with accounts, grain, and news. You think of those first irrigation ditches and the bossy neighbor who told everyone where to dig. The neighbor now writes in Aramaic, pays in gold, and sends auditors. Progress tastes like barley bread and a hint of metal. Night spreads calmly. No lamassu at the gate this time, just a polished welcome and the soft-shoed certainty of an empire that prefers predictability to drama. But you know memory stalks these streets. When Xerxes faces revolts, temples will feel the tremor. When Alexander arrives, the road he follows will be the one Persia laid, mile by mile, decision by decision. For now, you let the quiet wrap around you, a city working, scribes counting, canals murmuring, priests and officials nodding over the same ledgers. You climb the ziggurat and look east. Somewhere beyond the dark, Persepolis rises. Terraces, columns, stairways carved with processions of tribute-bearers from every corner of the realm. Bactrian camels, Ionian cloth, Egyptian ivory, Babylonian bowls. The art whispers the same idea as the road under your feet. Many paths, one center. Many tongues, one ledger. You feel a sleepiness that isn't surrender, but trust in routine. The empire has made time itself feel domesticated. Months trimmed, taxes timed,
messages arriving exactly when they should. You breathe with the city's even pulse and keep moving, a traveler on the king's long, long road. You walk the riverbank at dawn, the mud still cool, and watch a fisherman tug a net that might as well be a timeline. Everything you've met along these waters, beer straws and boundary stones, lamassu and lion hunts, tablets and tall gates, keeps tugging back. You feel it in your souls. The story doesn't end, it ripples. You step past reeds and shards of old pottery, winking like sleepy stars, and realize you're standing inside the long afterlife of Mesopotamia. You taste it every day without noticing. You check a clock divided into 60 tiny slices, then tap a map cut into 360 degrees. Base 60 hums along, a Babylonian lullaby disguised as math. You scribble a contract, initial a form, or sign for a package, and you're practicing a habit born under hot brick. Promise, witness, mark, store. A mainstream fact folds neatly here. The earliest writing that survives in quantity is administrative. Sumerian cuneiform tallying grain, labor, and offerings, long before poetry learns to sprawl. The first libraries, the first filing cabinets, the first "don't move that boundary stone, Greg," they're all here, whispering from clay. Joke 1. Somewhere, a very old scribe is still waiting for you to return a tablet within 2 lunar cycles. And then there's the sound of story. Gilgamesh, grieving under a sky that refuses to answer, still leans over modern shoulders. You stream the newest epic on your phone, and a very old king nods